Hotep, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel Leader, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here today with only one of my co-hosts, Michael Grays, a.k.a. Big Mike.
Namaste.
And we'd like to welcome you, once again, our viewing audience, to what we hope to be another provocative, informative program with his help, my help, and of course your help in about 30 minutes when we open up our phone lines. But this is where truth and real talk commences. So, take a seat, tell a foe, tell a friend that we're on the air. And as is customary, unfortunately...
That's James Padno, by the way.
James Padno, that's the brother who gave us that saying, where truth and real talk occurs. This is a Community Cop. But as is customary, and let me say, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the absence of our other two co-hosts, Father Lucas and Julian Harper, who's on the Community Cop Simon. Hopefully they'll be rejoining us next week. But as is customary, let's go straight ahead to our historical piece. And today we like to acknowledge one great man, David Ruggles, who was born, I think, in 3/15/1810, who was an abolitionist, a very grave position to take back then. But why don't you remind our viewing audience about this brother, David Ruggles?
Well, let me just say briefly, with respect to time, that David Ruggles was not only was he a great man as an abolitionist, he was a businessman right here in New York, so he didn't have to involve himself with the rigors of what it took to free our people. He could have lived a nice, good life right here in New York as a business person and enjoyed his family. However, he took the risk every day saving enslaved Africans who were yearning to be free. He saved approximately 600 enslaved Africans en route to places like Canada, New England, and other points of freedom. And he engineered his end of the Underground Railroad. And in that process, and by the way, last time we talked about David Ruggles, Sister Keisha texted me to remind me that that among the people that he helped free was Frederick Douglass. And so this time I'll remember, and thank you, Sister Keisha, for that text last time. David Ruggles, he did help free Frederick Douglass and so many other luminaries. So, it's just fantastic to see a brother at that young age, and that somebody far removed from slavery that sought freedom for his brothers and sisters in the Deep South, and anytime he was able to help, he did that.
And because the institution of enslavement of Africans was the law, anyone assisting them to get out of that institution was breaking the law.
Yes.
So he put himself and his freedom and his, his as you said,
family.
He was his family in jeopardy, but these individuals were courageous. And, only reason why I appreciate when you bring up individuals like him, because most people never heard of him. Now, we've heard of Harriet Tubman,
right,
and we should have heard about him, but there was literally hundreds, and I dare not say thousands, of individuals, African Americans, who assisted their kith and kin in escaping that particular institution. So this is just one of the greats that most of us don't even hear about. And to show how his work manifests or duplicated itself in freeing Frederick Douglass, Frederick Douglass became one of the very significant individuals at that time. All right, secondly, we want to remind our family about the Freedom Journal, which was a newspaper in 1827. Why don't you remind the family about that?
Well, following that, there was a plethora of newspapers that did follow suit. But in 1827, right here in New York, of all places, Freedom's Journal, in their opening issue, when they talked about too long have others spoken for us, and now we will speak for ourselves, and talked about striking the first blows of freedom and such. Incredible by Russworm and Cornish. Those were the two who co-editors of the newspaper. They came at a time where you're talking about white people very casually destroyed people's printing press, went after anybody that wrote anything unfavorable about the institution of slavery. So the first black newspaper, Freedom's Journal, incredible work. They got what was going on all over the country and was able to send that newspaper out using various ingenious ways to get it done. And so want to just credit so much Freedom's Journal for setting the tone, which was picked up later. Chicago Defender, Pittsburgh Courier, later the Amsterdam, so many others. But the first one, Freedom's Journal, we have to acknowledge that, and that was the drum at that time. So incredible that people who freed themselves were able to put together that type of communication system, because they could have again did something less dangerous, more in line with what those who were silent, but they choose to put their lives on the line and do something heroic and historic.
And when you look at the educated and the affluent, whatever that means, of that time in our community, they will raise people.
Right.
They did specific things to benefit the race. Unlike a lot of people who decide to venture into a lot of avenues, these individuals they seen the significance of assisting our race. They seen that there was a lack of services, a lack of information. So they took the initiative. A lot of times the black colleges, all of our black colleges, or practically all of them, were started way back when individuals seen a need to open up a higher education institution specifically for African Americans to train us in all of the fields of learning. So big ups to that particular newspaper and the significant role that it played in forming our community at that time. Fast forward today, we have more than a few police issues we want to talk about. But before we talk about some of the current issues, let's talk about Sister Tamir Rice, Officer Timothy Loman, who had lost his job because of an incident resulting into the death of Tamir Rice. Members of his department attempted to get him reestablished as a police officer. And this only shows that once we receive what appears to be a victory, when an officer is convicted or terminated, we can't let our guard down, because after we let our guard down and turn our head, this happens. They're trying to get him to be put back on the police force.
Well, that's why you've always maintained, Brother Noel, that they should be fired. They should not be allowed to resign. In his particular case, here you have Loman, who actually shot Tamir Rice, 12-year-old child, in case anyone forgot, within 2 seconds of exiting the car. As a matter of fact, he opened up his car door. The car was still moving when he opened up the door and jumped out. He was real heroic, going after a 12-year-old child who didn't even have a weapon, had a toy gun, which he was informed by the 911 operator that it's probably a toy, but he's playing with it, even though it was in his back pocket when the police arrived. It was in his back pocket by then, but it was a toy gun, and he was told that in all likelihood it's a toy gun. He's right across from the school, where he was right outside the door, playing right outside the door. And but in any event, the part I want to talk about with him is that he was terminated, but he was allowed to resign. Right. He did not ever face criminal charges. His charge was that he faced administrative charges. Him and the other officer, his charges was just that he had too soon, when he exited the vehicle, he came too close to the what became a crime scene, the shooting scene, and his partner drove too close, and they got his partner on driving too close, and they got him on not being forthright with the previous police department, the smaller police department that he worked for, that he didn't admit that he failed a written exam, and that in this folder, which was at the Cleveland Police Department, by the way, let's be clear, that it said that he was incompetent, that he was emotionally disturbed, he was unfit to be a police officer, and he had an emotional outburst on the shooting range. So the prior police department had it in this folder. It was sent to Cleveland's personnel office. So it was in his folder that they said he's unfit to be a police officer, yet they hired him anyway. So they ended up firing him, saying he wasn't forthright in mentioning it, but it was in his folder. He didn't have to mention it. It was in his folder. So if they had reviewed it, he would not have been on the job in the Cleveland Police Department. But in any event, now that he's cleared of criminal charges and he only faced administrative charges, the Cleveland Union, and you're talking about a brutal police department, that Cleveland Police Department, the same one that shot 130 plus rounds into a car of two people that did not have a gun, did not have drugs, and the car wasn't stolen. It was a 68 car chase that they chased them all over Cleveland. And when they finally stopped and cornered them off, they shot over 130 plus rounds, capped off by Michael Brelo, who jumped on top of the hood of the car like he was Clint Eastwood or somebody and emptied his last magazine into the vehicle, making sure that the two people were dead. So that same police department are the ones that's trying to get Loman back on the job. It's just disgraceful. He's right now, as we speak right now, he's in another police department, a smaller police department. And I could read to you that the police chief who hired him basically said everybody needs a second chance, knowing full well that the first police department said he was unfit, that he should not be a police officer, that he could not even follow basic commands well, so he couldn't even hold information in his head. When you're giving an order, giving instructions, he can't even complete that in a significant way. And yet he, when he went to Cleveland Police Department and killed a 12-year-old boy, now he was able to resign, go to a smaller police department outside of Cleveland, and the police chief who hired him said, everybody needs a second chance. It is disgusting, it is deplorable, and it only shows you what white skin privilege is.
And it's a plethora of cases. I think we're going to talk about one later on of whites killing blacks and getting a smack on the wrist. As you stated, he should have been terminated. He was only allowed to resign.
He should have been terminated and faced criminal charges.
He should have been prosecuted and convicted because, as you stated, his lack of tactics contributed to this particular incident. His deciding to lie about what actually occurred, purge himself.
Well, let me mention a lie real quick.
Right.
He says that when he jumped out of the car, he told him drop the weapon.
That's a young man.
He told Tamir Rice to drop the weapon several times, and he said when he ignored it, that's when he shot his thing. But if you look at the tape, he within 2 seconds, while the car was actually moving, he was opening the car door, jumped out, and started firing.
And this is a child.
In less than 2 seconds. 1.5 seconds.
This is a child in the playground, not too far from
right next to the school.
Right. And the union is attempting to get him reestablished back on the job. Another police shooting happened in Florida. Officer Newman Raja was recently found guilty of manslaughter and attempted murder for the 2000 fatal police shooting of Corey James. Fortunately, in this particular instance, as you stated, in the one in Cleveland, and I did want to go back to something about that Cleveland shooting.
Right.
There was a recording, and which contradicted the Officer Raja's version. And for those who don't remember, brother Corey Jones' vehicle had broken down. He was on the highway. And Officer Raja, who was in plain clothes, came in the opposite direction, and Officer Brother Corey Jones, I imagine, assumed that he was being robbed. But fortunately, he was on the phone with the trucking company about to get towed, unbeknownst to the police officer. So the police officer stated that he approached him in a professional manner, identified himself as a police officer, gave him an order, which none of that proved to be true when you listen to the tape. The officer lied, and he wound up shooting and killing the brother as he ran. So he's facing a possible life sentence, and we'll see. Because, as I say to family, the victory is not won when these officers get convicted or when they get charged. We want him to be sentenced to the fullest extent of the law as any other civilian would happen. But, so we still have to remain vigilant, until this officer received the sentence. And it's a victory, but, he may have thought he was white. I think he's of Indian descent.
Right.
So he may have thought he was white in the police department, but I imagine.
Well, obviously he felt that he had a higher station than a black person,
Right.
even if he's not white. He felt superior to a black person, and he thought he could take his life and just lie like the other white cops
Right.
did.
And what we see is a lot of these convictions, a lot of them are people of color when they get their hand. And now, I don't care what color you are. I don't care if this officer is black, white, or Latino, whatever. If you take someone's life, there's no justification. You should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. All right, another incident with Philadelphia police detective. I know we wanted to talk about this story for a couple of weeks.
Right.
He was accused of raping black witnesses and suspects.
Yeah, Detective Philip Nordo, this has been going on for well over decades, literally 2 decades, where he has been inquiring witnesses and going back to asking them what happened, and then because of either they had either a prior history of arrest or they were not considered credible, he would rape them. And I'm talking about males, by the way. He was not raping females. He was raping male witnesses and suspects that he would go and question. He would ultimately rape them, and he warned them that if they tried to report this, they would suffer the consequences. And this went on for a while. Now, what happened back in 2005 was he went to interview somebody. They brought them out of a jail, brought him out of jail, brought him into the precinct in a room where they used for questioning. So they were questioning him. And so what he did was he gave the guy a cigarette and allowed him to smoke a cigarette, which he wasn't supposed to do. And then while the guy was smoking a cigarette, he asked him to pull his pants down. He wanted to see his penis. And then he actually went from rubbing the inmate's penis to actually going down on him. And he actually made the inmate ejaculate. And then after that, he told him that the session was over. But the inmate was smart enough to keep the cigarette butt, and then he ejaculated in some paper, rubbed it in some paper and threw it under the desk. And Nordo didn't notice it, that the cigarette butt and the paper with his semen on it, with the inmate semen on it, was under the desk. So when he left, the inmate told the police officers there who was going to take him back to the jail that what had happened, and that the guy felt him and all that stuff and made him, perform for him. So the officers went to Internal Affairs and actually reported it. So when all these other cases happened on the outside, they went back to the 2005 case, in which they had the, what do you call that? The material, what's that called?
Forensic evidence?
The forensic evidence to show that the guy did ejaculate while he was in that session with Detective Nordo, and that he did have the cigarette butt, which he told him would all be under the desk. So that's when they started an investigation, but they left it alone. It lay dormant all these years. But when all these cases came from outside, that he was raping black suspects, males, raping them and telling them, threatening them that they told, well, it all came to a head, and they went back to that 2005 thing, added them all up, and they just locked them up a few weeks ago.
Well,
so he did it for the longest.
Right.
A white guy, he's about 54 years old, was doing this for a few decades.
I mean, we had a similar
situation where it was a police officer in Far Rockaway who was raping black males. He was primarily picking on the dollar vans who were being drove by continental Africans.
Right.
They were driving dollar vans in Far Rockaway, and he was raping them ad nauseum and telling them he'll have them deported and that he'll blow their brains out if they told him.
All right, so we'll see if this officer is indeed convicted and sentenced for for the, those horrific acts. Let me talk about a subject that I've been talking about for the last 2 weeks. Excuse me, and that's our Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. The Democrats, as you know, came out with a resolution condemning anti-Semitism and racism, a watered-down version. But the report has come out that the Democrats who were most critical of our sister Omar for criticizing AIPACs, Jewish AIPACs, were individuals who were receiving the most money from Jewish AIPACs. For example, Elliot Ingalls, who accused our sister of stating a vile and anti-Semitic slur, has taken over $107 million throughout his career, which is about $107,000 per election from these AIPACs. Cory Booker, who called Omar's comments disturbing, he himself has received $445,000 during his Senate during his only one Senate campaign from these same AIPACs. And of course, Christian Gillibrand, who also was a big critic of our sister Omar, has received about $367,000 or $91,000 per election from these same political AIPACs, which shows the hypocrisy of these individuals not revealing this information. The organization that she criticized for influence elected officials for the sole purpose of their pro-Israeli stands have received money from these particular AIPACs. And not only that, but this week or last week, an anti-Zionist organization, a Jewish organization, came out in support of our sister to say what she is saying is correct, and that these AIPACs, which they disagree with, do spread out money to elected officials in this country for the sole purpose of influencing their decision on the nation of Israel. So all I just pointed this out, the hypocrisy out, is because this has received a lot of flack over the last couple of weeks. She has been coined as an anti-Semite for stating something that these individuals who receive money from these same political action committees know is true, and that fortunately the truth is coming out. She's gotten Jewish support that supported her statement, that said it wasn't an anti-Semitic statement. She has a problem with political action committee having influence over elected officials, just like the NRA. They fund people in Congress and in the Senate for the sole purpose of their particular one issue. She just took issue with the fact that it's a foreign nation. It's a political action committee whose interests they're putting over this country's interests. That's right. Over foreign, and it's a correct. So this information didn't come out too much over the so-called white media, main media, that these individuals who have been the biggest critics are receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars from the AIPACs, these Jewish, European Jewish AIPACs, and that, you even have people from the Orthodox community that have come forward and say what the sister said. They don't take offense to it. She's not anti-Semitic. They support her. And yes, these AIPACs do support candidates for the sole purpose of their, allegiance to the nation of Israel.
Sure. Well, you're not supposed, you're literally acting as foreign agents.
Right.
When you start doing that. You're a foreign actor once you start acting out the bosom interests of another nation over your own nation, which is America. Now, from the outset, you cannot say anything disfavorable about the state of Israel without receiving flack and some blowback. For example, Jimmy Carter, he talked about the state of apartheid that they utilize over there with respect to Palestinians. He said it's apartheid just like South African apartheid. He admitted as much, was called anti-Semitic for that. When he admitted that they have well over 200 nuclear heads, he was roundly criticized for that. He was called anti-Semitic, and he knows he's a former sitting president. He knows how many nuclear heads that they have. So we understand that anything you say as an observation, when you're making a clear observation, you'll be criticized for it. Now, you can criticize Egypt. You can criticize Iran. You can criticize Cuba. You can criticize any country. You can even criticize America. But if you criticize Israel, suddenly you're anti-Semitic. Nobody's saying you're anti-Muslim if you criticize Iraq or Iran. But somehow this Israeli Defense Forces, Israeli, the political machine can do no wrong, and anybody that says anything about it, you're going to receive blowback.
And with Jimmy Carter, when he talked about the undeclared nuclear weapons that the nation of Israel has, according to the United Nations, you're supposed to report on your nuclear weapons. But everyone knows Israel has nuclear weapons, but nobody talk about it. And they know Israel has nuclear weapons because when the nation of South Africa was racist and an apartheid nation, Israel assisted the racist nation of apartheid to get a nuclear weapon, which Nelson Mandela agreed to dismantle when blacks took over the nation. So, that history is not even debatable. But we wanted to talk about also, there was recently a program at the Schomburg Center, which is supposed to be one of our home base, a place that we can congregate and talk serious. Well, they had a program about the assassination of Malcolm X, and I heard some disturbing comments were made about Malcolm X and also about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Yeah, well,
which is kind of hard to believe. This is in the Black Belt. This is in the heart of Harlem.
Well, the Schomburg Library is a center for Black history and culture.
Right.
I think that's the how it's said. But in any event, you have a situation where on Malcolm's assassination on February 21st, they had a program, and on that program, it was a panel of 4. They had several people, all of them were basically college professors, all 4 of them, and the sister from City College, Vanessa Valdez, she made questionable statements, as well as a guy, Simba Santa, he made several statements. Now, a lot of questionable things, but the main 2 that disturbed me, I must admit, is one, they characterized the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as a sexual predator. Now, whether you like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad or not, he was not a sexual predator. A predator suggests that he's roaming the earth, taking what he wants, and, actually you're involved in rape. If not murder. He didn't rape none of those women. Those women defended him, and those women were considered his wives. And they were not underage. All of them were 18 or older. None of them were raped. So how can you call him a sexual predator? Now, you would think if you want to call somebody a sexual predator, why don't you call Strom Thurmond a sexual predator? For raping a little 13, 14-year-old girl whose mother worked in his house on their plantation. Call Strom Thurmond one. Call Thomas Jefferson one, who raped a little girl, 14 years old, Sally Henney. Why don't you call that person a sexual predator? But no, you save your venom to attack your own. You attack the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who did more for our people than all 4 of you professors will ever do. Did more in leaving behind an institution that had an economic base, had a military base, had a religious base, and yet you attack him in his absence, and you've done nothing for our people, nothing of note. Then you have the nerve to turn around and attack Malcolm. In the same breath, after you attacked Elijah Muhammad, you turn around and say Malcolm was a sex worker that did sexual acts on males. How dare you say something like that? You don't have any empirical data to prove any of that. I know Maribel wrote in his book something to that effect, and one of the panelists worked under Maribel. You take what's hearsay, not documented, and then you act as if it's a matter of fact. Now, the person who asked the question, he was a flaming homosexual. That's who he was, the one who even asked the question from the audience. And then you had guys who were, you could see they were homosexuals on that panel that had the nerve to entertain that and say, well, one admitted that the evidence wasn't there. And then the sister who led the panel, she works for City College, by the way, Valdez, that she had the nerve to say that, well, why would people be reluctant to look at Malcolm as a sex worker who performed on males when at the same time he admitted to being a pimp? Yes, he admitted to being a pimp. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad dragged him out of that mud of a life of being a pimp, a drug abuser, a person who carried a gun and committed crimes. Malcolm admitted to all that. Said he was a criminal. And said that he was all messed up. Detroit Red. Yeah, he was all of that. But he became out of that and became a great leader in his own right. So why would you say, well, he was a pimp? And he was a pimp, but there's no evidence to say that he committed homosexual acts anywhere. And it's just disgraceful that there wasn't a response from the crowd. It looked like a crowded house. I saw the show. It looked like a crowded house. Nobody would get up and defend the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Not one person in the heart of Harlem would defend Malcolm and tell them to check themselves for saying something like that, claiming that he was a homosexual. It's just disgusting. And those are the kind of things we got to do better. I hope the sister teacher from Westchester call in, because I know she goes to those functions, and maybe she can provide some clarity to that.
And people always have to make a distinction. Malcolm X, and I know you know, was not a pimp. Malcolm X was not a criminal. Detroit Red was a criminal.
Right.
When Malcolm X became Malcolm X, he was upright. He was a member of the Nation of Islam. He was upright. He was a progressive member of our community. He was conscious. He was a nationalist. So, when people make those disparaging statements about Malcolm X, they act as if there's no demarcation between what he was and what he became. Malcolm X was our hero. And, I'm
our shining black prince.
Right, I'm glad you took issue.
David said, it's disgusting.
I'm glad you took issue with the comments that made on the great.
And Elijah Muhammad was not a sexual predator.
Exactly.
Whatever he did was between consenting adults. So you mind your damn business.
And some of his the mothers of his children were at the last Million Family March, and they articulate their support and their love for the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and how he did assist them in raising the kids, and they speak very glowingly. They're now faithful members of the Nation of Islam.
That's right.
Under Minister Louis Farrakhan. So the critics and all the finger pointers have a tendency to be outside the nation.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? All right. Real quick, I know we have some phone calls. There's been a recent rash of white criminality, whites being convicted of some horrific crimes and not being sentenced, not being incarcerated. This one incident of an 18-year-old white woman who killed a family of 3 just received 3 years probation. There's an individual named Justin Snyder who was in Alaska who kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and attempted to murder an indigenous woman, and she didn't die. She pointed him out. He was convicted, but he just received probation, no jail time whatsoever. Why don't you talk about this 18-year-old white woman?
Well, let me just say quickly,
her name
is Zoe Reardon. She ran over a family of 3, 2 adults and a 3-month-old baby. Ran over them, lied and claimed that they just walked in front of her vehicle, her Jeep. However, when they did the research, they found out she was just texting someone. So she lied about it, but the judge gave her 3 years probation and said, you young, you got your whole life in front of you. In other words, that's that identification, his white skin and her white skin, and he let her go because she just ran over 3 black people. A child that didn't even get a chance to live, 3 months old. It's just disgusting of what they allowed to do, and that all goes back, as I said last week, to Dred Scott.
And can you imagine a black man kidnap a white woman, sexually assault her, attempt to murder her, choke her until she's unconscious, thinks she's dead, and take off, and he only get probation?
Yeah, white man.
So as you notice, as you see, and we talk about it very often on this program, white skin privilege is even extended to white criminals who victimize non-white people in most instances. But all right, now it's time for our phone calls. First caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Yes, sir. Kareem, brother.
Hotep, brother.
Assalamu
alaikum.
I love the way you brothers is making it plain, especially Mike, what you said, brother. Let me just add this to it. we all fall short of the grace of Allah because we all sin.
Right.
Now, Allah says in the Quran that He's going to deal with us according to our intentions and our deeds. And what you brother said about Elijah Muhammad was 100% right, brother. All of us fall short, and what he did as a man, he's going to be forgiven because all of us have done the same thing. I don't hear any of these Negroes calling in and talking about the Catholic Church with all these priests raping children for hundreds and hundreds of years. I don't hear them saying anything about Trump and what he's done according to what they did to Bill Cosby. And also, Malcolm is one of the brothers who stood up under the teachings and guidance of Elijah Muhammad and stood up as a man, and that's what started our people really to stand up as man and fighting the back of what these devils have been doing to our people. So how could these Negroes all of a sudden come and attack their own, right? But yet still, you don't hear them saying nothing about none of that. That brother's doing a great job, brother. Mike, I love the way you made it plain. I love the way your other brothers came in and explained it also. And we will be judged by God Himself. So all this stuff about these Negroes talking, you don't hear them saying nothing else about them. So keep doing a great job.
Blake Salam, sir, thank you for your call. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. And by the way, when they talk about the popes, the sexual history of the child molestation, now that's only one thing. If you look at the history of some of the popes, some of them have not even sexual history. Some of them have some embarrassing, cold-blooded killers, and it's documented fact, but you never hear those criticisms. So, brother, as you stated, point on. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Scobie, Lower East Side.
Okay, quick question or comment.
All right, Noel and Mike, you guys I just want to ask you a question real quick. You guys know anything more about that cop, that Somali cop or whatever from that Midwestern state that killed that white woman? Any further, any new news on that?
Right, I don't think he's been sent to trial as of yet.
No,
I know he was arrested
so.
and he's being charged. He most likely, I believe, was indicted by a grand jury. I don't think
he was indicted already.
Yeah, I don't think it went to trial as of yet.
And secondly, real quick, I know you guys are not surprised about the judicial system. It's doing exactly what it was designed for.
That's correct.
Okay, have a good day now, fellas.
All right, take care.
And that's one of my problems I had with candidate, what's the sister's name? Used to be the former California State Attorney General. Kamala Harris. When she says the system is broken, I don't like that terminology because the system is not broken. Normally when something is broken, it's not functioning in the way that it was created to work.
Right.
The system is not broken. It's doing exactly what it was developed to do. The system is racist.
Right.
And that's one of the things these district attorneys or these people involved in these and politicians will never admit. They will never talk about the racism or the white supremacy, disproportionate sentences, blacks being overtly sentenced to crimes, that white people commit aren't. A lot of time whites get alternative to incarceration. So all studies have shown, all comparison, all analysis have shown that this system, criminal justice system, is racist. It's not broken. It's racist. And unless you really identify the problem, you're not going to fix the problem. So it's easy to say it's broken.
Well, it's not. It's like you said. It's set up that way when the sister Melissa, what's her name, Melissa Alexander,
right?
The sister was being beaten by her ex-husband,
right?
Beating the stuffing out of her, had already put her in the hospital several times. She took a gun in Florida, in a stand-your-ground state, a legal weapon, a gun, shoots it up into the roof in the air. Instead of putting it in him, which he should have done, she shot up in the air, and she turns around and gets arrested. And then the district attorney went all out, threatened to give her 20 years, and wanted her to cop out to a plea of 2 or 3 years. But because of the community pressure, thank goodness you had some black folks with integrity in Florida, fought the good fight, and she's been exonerated. But look what, in a stand-your-ground state, defending herself from a person who had already put her in the hospital and was trying to beat the stuffing out of her, she shoots rounds into the air, and she ends up going to jail because her ex-husband was white and she's black.
So that's not a broken system.
It's not a broken system.
That's a racist system.
That's a racist system.
All right, next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
How you doing? I'm calling from Harlem.
Okay, brother. Quick question, comment.
Okay, how you brothers doing? I just want to let y'all know that even when they fire the cops, they become firefighters, because
True.
I work for transit, and I knew a cop that shot a brother downtown. Instead of them firing him, they made him a transit bus driver, and I helped train him. I had no choice, but that's exactly how it is. And the tentacles of homosexuality, it came in with the civil rights movement. If you let Sharpton tell you about Ben Rushton and the rest of them guys, y'all have a blessed one. Talk to you later.
Right. Thank you. All right, thank you for your call, brother. Next caller, welcome to the Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Yes, good afternoon. This is JNR Records from Brooklyn. How you brothers doing?
Hotep Brooklyn.
All right.
Brother Mike, what's up? How you feeling, man?
Oh, brother, bless, man. Good to hear from you.
Good. I just have a comment to make. You know, it's funny about people talk about banning R. Kelly records, but everybody sings Amazing Grace. And it's just so ironic that this person that wrote that song was a slave owner. And yet they're ragging R. Kelly, and if he did or not, it's wrong, but he didn't own any slaves, R. Kelly. You know what I mean, brother?
Right.
Yes.
Nah, you're absolutely right. And the person who wrote that song was not only a slave owner, he was a slave trader. He bought and sold slaves, and only because he was in a storm in a boat, and he almost died in that ship, that he turns around. He had what was commonly called the come to Jesus moment, where he saw his life passing in front of it, or the other term, epiphany. But he was a devil like the rest of them.
Well, wait a minute, brother. Brother, you're a Yankee or a Met fan?
I'm not into baseball.
Okay, because I thought I seen you at the baseball game standing for the national anthem, and Francis Scott Keys was a white supremacist. So why are we standing for that song?
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, if we want to dig up people's history, if we want to talk about criminality and supporting, there's a whole lot of folks who we should acknowledge, or there should be a protest for them.
Well, brother, I know you're a Knicks fan because I saw you at the game.
You ain't see me stand at the national anthem.
You got jokes.
You ain't see me stand at the national anthem, brother. I do not stand for that anthem. That's not my anthem.
Right.
That anthem represents oppression, exploitation, and a grafted devil mentality. Thank you, brother.
Brothers have a good evening. You guys are doing a fine job. Take care.
All right, keep calling, brother. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Brother Ray, how you doing?
Hotep, Brother Ray.
Big Mike.
All right. Hotep, Ray.
Listen, point number one, tomorrow, 7:30, Mackey's to the Third lecture series will be resuming at 103 Quincy Street. We're going to be getting started at maybe 7:45.
7:30, brother, 7:30.
That's 103 Quincy Street, corner of Franklin Avenue. That's tomorrow. We have a dynamite speaker. Come on down. Number two, March 28th is supposed to be the court date at Supreme Court for Maya Gibson.
That's right.
The 14-year-old that was being raped by her father at the church on Howard between Herkimer and Atlantic. That court case is coming up.
Progressive Baptist.
Number three, I think they should still get that book, Paul Fenley, They Did Not Speak Out. And she should talk to Cynthia McKinney to find out what's really going on, because I don't think she really knows what time it is in America. And one more. The old Nation of Islam would not have to stand for that.
Well, there's no doubt about
Malcolm X back in the days would not have to stand for these folks making these statements. Now, you see, as soon as the Jews say something, you're anti-Semitic, and they're ready to roll on you, stomp you out, and do things to you. But see, we ain't ready to do that no more. If they know its ramifications, or when they open up their mouth, they will stop opening up their mouth. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your call, brother. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hey, brothers, how are you this evening? I'm calling from Harlem.
Okay, Harlem. Hotep, brother.
Hey, I just wanted to make a comment about that caller. I think it was your last one from last week who made that comment about the status of the black community being the Maury show.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would just say straight up, black folks in our neighborhood, not only in New York City, but across the country, need to stay on code here, because we have a lot of folks gentrifying our communities who think like this. And
That's right.
You know, I mean, it was just really disgusting to hear that type of attitude, which we all know that most of them keep hitting anyway.
Right.
That's all I have to say.
Okay, excellent point, brother. Thank you for that call. Thank you for those comments. And when he tried to make disparaging comments about the activities or lifestyles of African American people, and we were talking about historically, I mean, there's nothing you'll ever see any black person do on that show that you pick up American history book and you can see what was done by your average American citizens in terms of the depravity, the murder, the torture, the hatred. So there was no comparison, but thank you for your call, brother. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hotep.
Hotep, where you calling from, caller?
Hey, Noel, Mike, how y'all doing? This is Brother Brian out in Queens.
Okay, Queens.
Brother,
Hotep,
from the mighty CMOTEP organization.
Yes, that's me, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Listen, Mike, I was there at the Schomburg on the 21st, and I'll be honest with you, I really don't recall hearing any of that negative activity being spoken.
It's documented.
It might have got by me, though. I'm not saying they didn't.
I think it did.
Okay, it might have gotten by me then, because I was chatting with someone.
They were intellectually masturbating so much that I could see where your mind would drift, because they wasn't talking about Malcolm. They was really talking about Alex Haley's writing style of the autobiography. And when they ventured to Malcolm, after admitting he was a great man, they had the nerve to say these disparaging remarks, which came from somebody who I think they were all idolizing Black Lives Matter movement, which is a gay, white organization with black people in it. That's all it is. And they use him, because they kept on talking about the Black Lives Matter organization as if that could compare to the Nation of Islam and what the Nation of Islam was doing back then in the 60s and 70s. There's no comparison. So you missed it in any of it, brother. You can check it out.
You know what? I lost interest in the program because the panel was young. There were young people up there, like you said, and they were trying to compare. They were saying how Malcolm influenced hip-hop. And I lost interest I said, oh, hell no. So I lost interest in what they were talking about right away. I wasn't paying that much attention. It might have gotten past me what they said.
Yeah, because they weren't talking about anything worth listening to. And,
right, exactly.
And the fact is, they were not young, but they were, let's say, in their 40s.
Yeah, well, if they were into hip-hop, if they were so concerned about Malcolm influencing hip-hop and playing such a role with today's hip-hop, I'm like, what are they talking about? Malcolm had nothing to do with hip-hop.
Yeah, but that's just people that are not grounded, people that are not organically linked to the black community. These were college professors. That only show you the difference. We talked about earlier about David Ruggles, how he was a race man. Noel called him a race man. We can talk about Freedom's Journal, race men, people who unapologetically supported the race, that put their life on the line for the race. These 4 college professors, are they putting their lives on the line for the race, or are they proponents of Black Lives Matter, a gay white organization with black people at the head of it? That's all they are. They're disgusting, and they better be glad, as Ray pointed out, because I know how the old nation got down, and they're not going to allow you to disrespect their leader, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. They would have had a problem in Harlem. Put it that way. And I'm not suggesting criminality is the way, but I'll tell you, they would have had a problem in Harlem.
All right, brother. Thank you for your phone call.
Peace.
Peace. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hello?
Where you calling from, caller?
Brooklyn.
Okay, quick question or comment?
My comments are, what's going on with some of our so-called leaders, and some of these guys that they are bringing up on charges, such as Bill Cosby and
R. Kelly.
R. Kelly and things like that. And you always get these hit people like, what's the name, Gayle King, Oprah Winfrey, making statements to ensure that these brothers don't get a fair hearing or trial. Because when you look at the evidence, even with Bill Cosby, how is it that one jurisdiction or county going to take the case of with Bill Cosby to another, years later, to another county, if they didn't have what you call it, a change of venue?
Well, okay. Excellent point, brother. Excellent point. But go ahead, brother.
I would just say real quickly that this Me Too uprising that's going on all over, you have to remember, where were they for Tawana Brawley? And if that's too dated for you, where were they for Camilla Brock, a black young sister in her 20s, an executive for a bank who got pulled over, her car confiscated, her getting arrested, and then when they let her go, the next day they put her in the hospital for 8 days on psychotropic medication. Where's the Me Too movement with that? That's recent.
DSK.
Or what about DSK? When DSK raped the sister from Africa. So where's the Me Too movement when it comes to that? It's fake. It's all about white women. Where, the white women's organization now, National Organization of White Women, they're silent anytime something happens to a black woman. They're only there for white women, and they need to admit that.
All right, thank you for your call, brother. Thank you for your call. Thank you for your call, brother. Next caller, we've got a lot of phone calls in a short time. Next caller, welcome to Community Talk.
Yes, hello. My name is Constance, and I wanted to comment on the I Believe I Can Fly, written by R. Kelly. And what I wanted to say was, that should stay very much right into the culture because, about flying. The late Julius Lester, he made a note of this in our black folklore. And that's a part of folklore, flying, I would just say, bettering yourself, bettering your condition. And you could see over there on 125th Street, maybe 135th, but I think 125th Street, where, that they have people flying, moving ahead.
We got it, sister. Thank you for your call. She just supported that particular song. All right, next caller. Next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? You're on the air, caller.
Hello?
Where you calling from, caller?
I'm from the Chelsea area.
Okay, quick question or comment?
Yeah, listen, I read the Malcolm X book and I saw the Malcolm X Spike Lee movie, and I remember some things and forget others, but I thought that Malcolm X left the Nation of Islam because of Elijah Muhammad's infidelity as he got some woman pregnant. They didn't say that he raped her, but I thought that that's why Malcolm X left the Nation of Islam, because of infidelity. That's what I remember.
No, that's not accurate.
Malcolm X actually didn't lead the Nation of Islam. He was he was suspended for the Nation of Islam, and his suspension was never lifted. So ultimately, he joined and started his own organization. Right. So that's the historical fact.
And the facts are, he would have come back into the nation if the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had just came in and said, "Come on back, brother." He would have came right back. And so he did not outgrow the nation. He did not feel the nation was beneath him at any point. He would have came back into the nation had he been allowed to.
Okay. And is that a caller?
One more.
Right. All right. Last caller. We got one last caller we got to go to. Last caller, you got 30 seconds. Quick question or comment. Where you calling from?
It's the Westchester teacher, gentlemen. How are you?
Good. Why do you always want to end the program, sister?
This is how long they had me on. Listen, real quick. The Malcolm X situation, unless you heard it firsthand from the people who worked with him in the nation and his children who I've met and I've talked to, the stories, the book, there's a whole lot of farce. The last thing, please support Bennett College, which is a black college. It's about to go under as another HBCU that they're trying to get rid of. I'll try to call earlier next time, but have a good day, gentlemen.
What's the name of that school, sister?
Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. Okay. They're trying to close it like the other black colleges, St. Paul's and Morris Brown.
Now, you was there at that program?
No, I was out of town. I just lost my parents, so I was out of town for it. I heard about it, but I wasn't able to attend.
Right. My condolences to you, sister.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Right.
All right. Have a good one, gentlemen.
Thank you for calling.
Take care.
All right. Closing comments.
Okay. Let me just say again and reiterate: we should not allow the desecration and a diminutive attitude that we get from these professors. These are not the professors like Professor Clark, Dr. Ben, Professor Jeffries, and so many others. These are professors that came up another route, that have another agenda. They got these PhDs, but their PhDs are not to help us. Their PhDs are, they sell their books, they make their statements, they go before white audiences, and they get approval from whites. I mean, who would even ever call the Honorable Elijah Muhammad a sexual predator? That makes no sense. It has no foot in reality. He was not a sexual predator. And who would make these baseless claims about Malcolm, our shining black prince, as I.C. Davis called him, our manhood? Don't reduce our manhood to some gay homosexual. In any event, black man, black woman, protect the black child, accept your own, and in the words of Honorable Elijah Muhammad, be yourself.
And as a community, we always have to make a distinction between black leaders and leading blacks.
That's right.
Black elected officials and black selected officials.
Go ahead.
We always have to make a distinction. I think that, Attorney at War Maddox always pointed that out.
That's
as a
right.
Community. Also in Venezuela, brothers and sisters, the misinformation continues. I don't believe that the national blackout that they experienced is by happenstance. I believe it was